All of us have secrets, even those that are living. We normally share them with a small group of people because we think that that way they're not going to get revealed. But sometimes the best secrets are hidden in plain sight. Almost a bit more than a year ago, a group of journalists, 400 journalists, to be exact, 376 journalists, joined forces to expose a topic that was very well known, but wasn't taken care of: the systematic use of tax havens. You've heard about tax havens this morning, and we're talking about it now. What are tax havens? Tax havens are these opaque places that provide for a parallel economy where the powerful benefit and operate. The powerful from any nationality, no matter what their profession is. Journalists are not normally interested in tax havens, but this time we were. And we worked collaboratively, forming the biggest investigation collaboratively done by journalists in journalism history, what it was known as the Panama Papers. So you may be wondering, how is it that we convinced 400 people to join forces and work together for a year on a secret topic? Well, I think that for us it was very important to have a common goal, and that meant an important project. And this important project started with these two German journalists in Süddeutsche Zeitung, and they had received a leak. They had received a hard drive with 2.6 terabytes of information. It amounted to 11.5 million files, connected to more than 200 countries, from China to Chile. And inside that hard drive were the files of a Panamanian law firm called Mossack Fonseca that basically had a business of creating companies in tax havens for people all around the world. They saw the big amount of information, and they knew they couldn't tackle it by themselves. So they came with a hard drive to Washington, D.C., where we have the headquarters of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, which is the media organization I work for, and we started knocking on doors of media organizations all around the world. You may think it was easy to convince the editors to work on this leak. It was the biggest leak in journalism history. But actually, it wasn't. Many editors told us, why should I put this in the front page? Using tax havens, it's legal. I want a story about illegalities, about crime. But you know what? As the President of the United States, Barack Obama, said right after we published, using tax havens is legal, but that is exactly the problem. Tax havens are these opaque places where you find an actress that buys a property in London using a British Virgin Islands company because she doesn't want the people to know where she lives, and one of the most wanted drug traffickers in the world. Thanks to tax havens, the war in Syria is financed, terrorism is financed, or nuclear weapons end up in North Korea. So in the end, we managed to convince a lot of journalists to work on this amount of information. We convinced more than 100 media organizations to work on this investigation for a year. Each of them had their own culture, their own way of operating, spoke different languages. So you can imagine it wasn't that easy to get them to collaborate. And this is not something that is done overnight. At the ICIJ, we've been working for almost 20 years forming these relationships, getting journalists to work together across borders. Project by project, we've been building trust. Trust that was invaluable to convince these more than 100 media organizations to work together. And forming trust is not normal to basically get all these people to work together. Because it happens in journalism, it may happen in the profession that you work on. Normally, we don't share information, right? In journalism, once you get a leak, once you get very exclusive bit of information, you keep it to yourself, and you don't want to share with anybody because it's important information and you want to benefit from it. I don't know if you remember Lord of the Rings and Gollum, this monster that had the ring, and he held onto the ring because it was his precious, and he didn't want to share it with anybody. So that's normally what happens in journalism and in many professions when you have exclusive information. You don't want to share it with anybody because you want the power to yourself. Instead of doing that, what we did is we shared that ring, we shared that hard drive, the 11.5 million files, with all the people in the team. Almost 400 journalists had access to 11.5 million files that were in the cloud. Anybody could research them, download them, do whatever they wanted with them from anywhere in the world, anytime. We also shared the cost of the investigation. Each one of these media organizations paid their journalists. And that is why and how we managed to get such a big team together, because one media organization wasn't able to pay for this costly investigation of millions of dollars, but if we distribute the cost, we managed to do it. So it's not that we shared only the information and we also shared the cost, and that was it. I think that it's important to understand that investigations like this happen because there's trust. And I want to share with you the biggest effort of trust that I've done in my life, which is doing trapeze. And you may see it on the screen at some point. That's me doing trapeze. I don't know if you've done it, but I totally recommend it. When you do trapeze, you have to go up 7 meters and get into a platform and hold on to a piece of wood, and you just have to jump. And I'm telling you that this is a very important trust moment, because there's a moment after you're done everything in the air that you just have to jump again, because in the other side, there's supposedly somebody that is going to catch you. And of course, you think about it and think, what if I stay here? Maybe I shouldn't jump. But if you want to do a good trapeze exercise, you just need to jump. And you jump and get the other person to catch you. And when that person catches you and takes you to the other side, is that the magic of trapeze happens, is that the magic of the circus happens. And it's much better than if you had stayed in the other side of the trapeze. So that is exactly what we told the journalists in the Panama Papers. We told them, let's do trapeze together. Let's trust each other, and let's just share. And they ended up sharing. They ended up doing trapeze with us. We shared everything that we were discovering in a social network platform. And every day you could log in, and you could find stories and names and leads found by other people while you were asleep. So somebody was doing the work for you while you were sleeping, and you could continue when you woke up. And day by day, we shared bits of information, and we ended up forming a big family. A family that you cannot betray. And it's a bit like the Musketeers. We were working all for one and one for all. And that's how we kept this information a secret for a year. After a year, we published. We all published together on April 3rd, 2016, 8 p.m. in Europe, Central Europe, in Paris, in Madrid. We published in front pages all around the globe, Le Monde in France, Première Ligne here on television, The Guardian in the UK, Univision in the United States. We all published at the same time, exposing a topic that at first didn't seem that interesting. We were exposing the systematic use of tax havens by celebrities, by business people, by politicians. Many politicians using the system. And it was important because it was affecting us all. Because tax havens are not just used for legal reasons, are used for illegal reasons, as I was telling you. Criminals hide there. And, of course, for tax evasion reasons. And that affects our societies. That affects the schools, that affects the hospitals, that affects the roads that cannot be built if we don't have taxes to pay for them. And, of course, affects the inequality that we have in our societies, and that it's getting growing, it's getting bigger by the minute. The impact that we had by publishing together, by joining forces, was unprecedented. We had ministers resigning. The Prime Minister of Iceland resigned. We had investigations by tax authorities that are now looking into those taxes that were being evaded in some cases. And we also have laws that are being changed so that we can build a better future, because not everything is solved. We saw in the Panama Papers how companies like Mossack Fonseca, this company that was facilitating all these people to work on tax havens, knew about every single loophole. One loophole is closed by the international community, the loophole appears in another place of the world. But we just didn't want journalists to investigate. We wanted people like you, citizens from the world, to investigate, and that's why we published some of the information online. We couldn't publish the 11.5 million files online because there were a lot of private information. There was bank accounts, there was passports. So we ended up publishing some part of the leak. We ended up publishing the names of the companies in those tax havens. More than 200,000 companies in tax havens, and the people behind those companies that had been hiding in secret for so many years. So now anybody can log into the website and make searches and see who is using tax havens. And of course, tax agencies can download the data and investigate those people. So now we've turned the power of hundreds into the power of millions. I have to say that we would not be here without a big effort of trust. Somebody jumped from the trapeze at the beginning of everything. The whistleblower that leaked this data. His name or her name is John Doe. It's an anonymous source. We don't know who he or she is, but what we know is that he said, I want to make these crimes public. And he didn't leak this information to governments. He leaked them to journalists. Why? Well, because he actually said that governments do not protect whistleblowers. And we just have to see how Edward Snowden, who leaked the files connected to the NSA, spying on citizens, is actually in Russia because his government in the United States wants to get him in prison. We just have to see the case of French whistleblower Alain Dentour, who actually gave the files connected to Luxembourg leaks. And he was handed in a suspended prison sentence in Luxembourg for this. The Panama Papers are just the beginning of this new era where electronic leaks are the new normal. But we live in a world where data is around us, and it's impossible that one of us looks into it and makes sense of it. The world is just very complex to be able to analyze it without joining forces, without tackling issues in a global way. Organized crime, terrorism, tax evasion works in a global way. So the journalists and the citizens have to work in a global way. Anybody, any of you, I don't care what you do. If you work for a government, if you work for a big corporation, or if you work for a small school, we can achieve great things if we work together, if we share knowledge, and if we collaborate. And we need responsible people that know how to keep a secret, but also at the same time when to reveal it. So I want to tell you that if I can take away one lesson from this Panama Papers investigation, is that it worked, nobody benefited, because we all had a common goal. And if we gather together around common goals that transcend us as individuals, and we work for the greater good, things like this, powerful things can really happen. Thank you.